Hey class, what's up? My name is Jared, and this is my Module 7 individual assignment post. And my whole topic of this post and workshop lesson is going to be, addressing systemic exclusion regarding children in educational settings. So as we go into this workshop, here are some goals and objectives that I'm gonna have for people that are listening to this workshop. Um, so essentially, what you'll learn is understanding the complex issues behind systemic exclusion. We're gonna learn about how it follows back nearly a whole century, and we're gonna learn about the different settings that kids are affected by these systemic exclusions. So and what you'll be able to do after this is hopefully advocate for those who can't stand up for themselves. In this case, it would be students. You'd be advocating for students who can't stand up for themselves. Hopefully come up with your own ideas to make everyone feel included, and also to make to make the educational setting more equitable for everyone throughout public education inside the United States. Um, so I'm talking about systemic exclusion and this topic a lot. Well, what is it? Well, what does it mean? Systemic exclusion is essentially the everyday process that is structured by laws, legislations, policies, even norms that really just deny a certain group of people, um, you know, any type of thing, education, resources, funding. But in simple words, in simple matters, systemic exclusion is the practice of making life inequitable for a specific group of people. And you might wonder, how did systemic exclusion turn into what it is today, especially with education? Well, in the 1930s, there was a two government associated organization, which was named the Federal Housing Authority and the Homeowners Loan Corporation. These two organizations worked together to orchestrate housing segregation. Well, with that being said, since public schools rely a lot on like heavily funded property taxes, there has actually been a systemic exclusion of unfair funding of schools all the way since the 1930s. And all of this information is given to us by the article that I posted right here. But in simple matters, um, with the segregation going back all the way since the 1930s, we've had black communities and white communities where the white communities taxing and funding has gone up, 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 while the black communities have been going down and down and down. So what ends up happening is local funded schools that are in the black communities usually pertain of having fewer locally taxed like schools and resources and funding that maybe not the white communities have. And it's not necessarily it's not their fault. It's systemic exclusion's fault. These racist and things that have been implemented ever since the 1930s. So what are some issues and growth of that? Well, some positive growth is that now in 2026 there has been increases in inclusion rates when it comes to not only just those systemic issues, but in English learners, Hispanic students, and even multiracial students with also disabilities as well. But some critical areas of needs that I noticed that I have noticed and researched on was you know on average, about 16% less state and local revenue per student when compared to school districts serve fewer students of color. So when you actually do the numbers of this, I ended up finding out that it's a whopping $2,700 gap per student annually when it comes to students of color rather than students of non-color. So the information's right there, and the systemic racism or the systemic exclusion is right there provided in front of us. The numbers are there. I just showed them to you guys. I did the research myself. If not, you guys could click on the resources that I'm gonna have at the end of the slides too. So with all this being said, We found out about systemic exclusion. We found out about these issues and growths. We found out about the workshops, our goals and objectives. So now we start to understand, well, what are we supposed to implement here? What is the universal design that we're going to try to apply? So first, we're going to try to provide equitable use. We want all kids to be, no matter black, white, student of color, POC, disability or not disability, gender, we want all equitable use. So with that being said, with systemic exclusion issues that date back from the 1930s, we don't want locally funded schools. We want, you know, we don't want resource hoarding. So we want everything to get dispersed evenly throughout the whole state. Seems simple enough, but how do we do that? Well, we create a centralized funding revolving around the state's control and not the government control. So let's not have the government control where the money's going to go or where it's going to get put into, if it's going to get put into the fields. Let's have our states govern that. Let's have our states control that. And so what question might be, well, hey, this is a government, this is just a different form of government. So what do we do then? Well, now let's implement floors and caps. So the floors and caps will allow for forgiveness of errors when distributing money throughout the schools. So what does floors and caps really mean? Well, floors will pretty much essentially, hey, we're going to provide every school with a floor. So you can't spend under this certain amount of money on anything that's provided for a school. And you can't spend more than this certain amount of money for, let's just say, schools that have higher locally funded taxes. So that way there's not a bottom school that is poor, that has limited amount of resources and no funding. There's going to be a floor for that. But we also have these really good schools, and other, parts of the state that have higher funded taxes, local taxes, and they're not going to be, hoarding, resource hoarding a whole bunch of funding that they're getting from their local taxpayers. So I think it's pretty even, like, hey, you guys do make more money in this area, you guys do pay more taxes, so you guys will have a higher cap. But with that being said, we do need support over here in our lower funded and taxed communities. So we're going to provide a floor for them just to help them out. Seems simple enough. You know what I mean? There's a tolerance for error, simple, and it's equitable. Who wouldn't want that? So anyways, when we move into the next slide, we're going to be designing an inclusive workplace. So what does that really mean? Well, inclusivity is always the goal at the end of the day. So we're going to be offering the same budget when it comes to all the fields and all the extracurricular activities and sports and stuff like that. All schools offer comfortable classrooms and environments. Classrooms, no matter what school you go to, and let's just say I'm from California. So, and no matter what school you go to in California, there's always going to be air conditioning. There's always going to be comfortable seats. There's always going to be, technology that is going to be provided to us. And it's not going to be different no matter if I move somewhere else in the state. So we're designing an inclusive workplace for these students so that way they can have, like physical and spatial environment, so that way everything is fair for them. And as we move into slide number 7, well, how do we do this? Well, this is how we do it. This is like a plan of how we can do it over time. So how do we advocate and give opportunity and have the opportunity to learn? Well, I created this chart where we have a theory and practice, we how we implement it, and what the end result is going to be. So these are just a couple that I came up with inside my head. So and these are additional ones to going back to slide 6 and number 5, but we're going to eliminate academic tracking. So pretty much what that means is, we're going to eliminate grouping, and we're going to utilize mixed ability classrooms to expose lower achieving students to perform stronger, just as the higher ones. Over time, this will create all students to be exposed at the same contents and perform at the same level. So what does this really mean? This means, hey, we're still going to have honors classes. Hey, we're still going to have AP classes. But instead of having like a basic gen ed class, we're going to require all kids to either take an honor or AP class. So what that pretty much means is, well, we're exposing the lower achieving students to perform just as the higher achieving. Well, why are we separating the mixed ability? Like, why are we separating these two students from one another? Um, and over time, this will create, both students perform at the same level. Um, my second theory is inclusive special education models. So we as a community, I think we segregate students with disabilities from students who with no disabilities. So let's integrate them. Why not? And ultimately, the result will allow special ed students to get on par education just like the gen ed kids, but while the exact same time the gen ed kids will also get exposed on how to treat, advocate, and also interact with special ed kids as well. Something not a lot of gen ed kids really get to do because we're so excluded from one another, especially in the classrooms. Another good way to advocate and learn for this is, let's provide education in all types of models for people who learn differently. Let's provide audio, let's provide text, and let's provide visual lessons and lectures. But not only that, but let's also provide a way to complete assignments differently. You know what I'm saying? So that way, let's just say someone who's not good at writing, but someone who is good like who's speaking, who's better at speaking, can maybe do a presentation on, hey, whatever assignment that the topic is, so that way they could better get a better grade on it. And for the students who choose to do and who are better at writing, they could do a writing assignment. Let's not constrict these students to only have one assignment like assigned to them. Yes, maybe it's one assignment, but let's have it different shapes, ways, and forms for you to submit it in a presentation, or in like a template form, or maybe you could do it in a Google Slides, or maybe you could do it in a Word document. Let's give these students the opportunities to show us where they excel at. And with that being said, let's go on to number 8, which is pretty much a summary of my presentation. So, we're overcoming systemic exclusion. We understand the challenge, as I told you. This has been a problem since the 1930s. There's 16% less revenue going on with the students, and there's a whopping $2,700 gap per student annually. Well, let's fix this. And how do we fix that? We do a state-controlled centralized funding dispersed evenly. And we also make an equal budget for the environment of the classroom, for comfort, and also for technology access by implementing floors and caps into the state funding. And how else can we take action and advocate for our students? Let's integrate them. Let's integrate them with one another. The higher performing students, let's integrate them with the lower performing students. The special ed students, let's integrate them with the gen ed students. And let's eliminate all these different groupings, and let's just have students be students. Let's have students display their form of learning differently by allowing them to submit assignments differently from one another, and not just this cookie cutter, complete this template and submit it type of assignments. That's just the way that I think. Let me know what you guys think when you respond to my comments. Let me know if you guys learned all the goals and objectives that I had for the workshop. And these are my resources if you guys want to check them out. I thought they were pretty interesting. I thought I did a good job on this presentation, and speaking the way that I did. I feel like I did a really good job on choosing a topic that I was actually invested in and not just doing it just because. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later in the comments, all right? Later.